In this session, we are going to be talking about boundaries and why they are so important in the context of small groups. So before Mark gets started, I have a question for you. When you hear that word boundaries, what do you think of? What comes to mind?
Safety.
Safety.
Yeah.
Healthy.
Mm-hmm. Healthy.
Good fences make good neighbors.
Good saying.
Sometimes difficult. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Say more. Difficult in what way?
I think sometimes I struggle with, I'm going to hurt that person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Think of misunderstandings. So not knowing why you have a boundary or why that person has a boundary and why I have mine.
Boundaries aren't universal necessarily, so that can cause misunderstanding. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else?
Sometimes they can seem limiting.
The courage to say no.
Yeah.
The courage
Yeah,
to say
it takes
no.
courage, doesn't it? Yeah.
And there will always be people who don't want to hear no.
Isn't that the truth?
Mhm.
Why do you think boundaries are so important? Before we even get into really talking about that, just off the top of your head, why do you think boundaries are important in the environment of a small group?
I think it creates a safe place for people.
Good.
Well, to speak metaphorically, you're not running all over the neighborhood when you have boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
You play in your own yard.
Yeah, exactly.
Sets expectations too.
Sets expectations. Yep.
So people can say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
And be
Very good.
confident in that.
That's good.
I think it's also about respect.
Yes.
I think it encourages trusting God's work instead of us feeling like we need to be the one to help this person. Sometimes boundaries set will be a significant part of their healing because you're allowing God to do the work
Mhm.
instead of humans.
Anybody else? Is somebody else going to say something, or we got everybody? All right. Tell us about boundaries.
So you guys have great insight on boundaries and your instincts. You're spot on. I want to maybe explain a little more how they work, so with confidence you'll be able to use them in your group leading. So boundaries describe where one thing stops and another thing begins. They help distinguish one thing from another. Relationally speaking, relational boundaries tell me what is my responsibility versus what is someone else's responsibility. And we have this sense, but we have all these one another commands in the scripture, right? So that we're supposed to be thoughtful about our interactions. So how does that work out? And something that's helped guide me is I'm responsible for me, I'm responsible to you. So I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for what I choose to believe. I'm responsible for how I feel. I'm responsible for choices I make, the words I say, the actions I take, and I'm responsible for the consequences of all of that. I'm responsible for that, and you're not. You're responsible for what you believe and how you feel, and your choices, the words you say, the behaviors you do, and the consequences of them. You're responsible for that, and I am not. Now you are, and you and God are. You share that. They share that responsibility. So the people in your group, they are responsible for whether they learn your lesson or not, whether they're holding a weird theological thought or not, whether they're sad or happy. That's all their responsibility. It's not our responsibility to make people happy or alleviate their pain and suffering. It's our responsibility to create this space where they can encounter God. And I do that by being responsible to them. So I'm responsible to treat you justly, fairly, kindly, respectfully, to uphold your dignity. I'm responsible to treat you in those ways. And the way that I'm responsible to you can give you the building blocks to learn things and to manage your life and to solve problems. But I'm not responsible for what you do with it. So in your group, you may give people lots of great building blocks, And some will take advantage and use what's being made available, and others may not. And you're not responsible for whether a person, what they do with the gifts you give. They're responsible for that. So it kind of helps me keep track, because I don't want to be so separate from people that I don't have, my heart's not moved, or, I want to have enough interaction that I'm touched by them, but I'm not defined by them. I'm defined by what God is doing in me and who He's made me. So responsible for, responsible to. Does that raise any questions or pause any thoughts? I'll just stop at that point, because that's an important one. Questions or reaction, thoughts to that one?
How do you respond to someone, say you are a leader in a small group, and a person in that group is kind of acting like you are responsible for them and like for their spiritual health?
Yes.
What is a good way to set a boundary in that?
Excellent. So there may be times when people ask of you something you think, I don't think I'm supposed to say yes to that. I don't think that's an appropriate thing. I think that's in their yard, not my yard. And so you get the sense, I don't think I can do that. So you think, well, the right answer is no. And we don't like no. We don't like people getting mad at us when we say no. It doesn't feel very kind or loving. But we get up our nerve and we say no. So here's the trick with that. When people ask an inappropriate request of, will you caretake me? Will you take care of me? And we think, I know the right answer is no, I'm not supposed to take care of you. We can say no. But the trick is there's a second question hiding behind the first. And the second question is, will you care about me?
Yes.
And when we say no to the first one, no, I can't do this inappropriate thing that you're asking me to do, they can hear no to the second question, no, you don't care about me. So it's a little bit of a trick question, but as always, I got my little trick answer for you. So that happens sometimes. We're pastors, we get folks calling in the church, and we all help kind of field those calls and things. So we sometimes get a call from someone who's asking, they spent too much money at the track, now they don't have money for rent, they want to know, can the church pay their rent? And I'm thinking, I don't think we are in the market of paying people's rent when they misspent their money. So the answer is no, but I learned to say it in a way that sounds a lot like yes. So I hear their story, I do listening, and I hear their request, and I start with, you know what? I'll bet there's something we can do to help. I'm not sure we can do exactly what you're asking, but I'm pretty sure we can do something that will help. So I start with the yes, sandwich the no in the middle, but reinforce the yes. I can do something. Now, as one of you said, some people just don't take no. And they're like, well, you Christians don't care, and and you think, oh, they are not happy with hearing no. And in that case, there's not a lot you can do. Just someone is very invested in getting you to solve their life problems. They're only going to be happy with you solving their life problems. But there are a majority of people who, when they hear that, they go, oh, that's a little disappointing because I wish you would just rescue me. Because honestly, who here wouldn't wish someone would rescue us in our hard, difficult times? I would love it. Sign me up. But they'll go, well, I wish you would rescue me, but if you're willing to help me, all right, let's see what can you do to help me. And for some people, that'll be enough. And it reinforces that they're in charge of their life. And it also says that I believe you can be in charge of your life. What's fascinating is even if someone says, will you solve this problem for me? And should you say, all right, fine, I'll solve that problem for you. The unspoken message, and it might not even be in their cognitive part of their brain, but in their deep heart brain, they hear the message, yeah, I think you're not able to live your life. I'm going to have to do this for you. You're not capable. And so even though it was the thing they asked for, they might also feel like this little wound to their heart. You don't think I can live my life? Yeah, I'm going to have to do this for you. So it's weird. It's what's underneath and what's in their mind. They could be mad at you because you didn't solve their problem, but part of them says, but they think I can do it. They think I and God can do it. They're willing to help, but they think I can do it. And so it speaks a message to their heart when we honor it to say, oh, I can't do that, And then the other part is when I say no to a thing, I like to be able to, what I can say yes to. And so I can't do that, but I could do this. And I'm glad to do this. Would that be helpful to you? And so that, for again, some people it's not enough, and others will say, all right, well, let's do that. Let's work on helping me figure out my life.
So in the case of like spiritual growth, something like that, so no, I am not responsible for your spiritual growth, but yes, I care about it, and yes, I will walk with you, be by your side as you're growing and working through things. Mm-hmm. Is that an appropriate response in that scenario? Well,
and we're going to learn in a future session active listening, which gives me something to say sometimes when I feel like I'm put on the spot. I don't know what the right answer is. So sometimes active listening gives me the next thing to say. And just reflecting back that, so you really wish I could solve your problem for you? Yes. And sometimes if I just stay silent, they'll start talking because I don't think I can solve it. And as long as they're talking, they're doing work, right? They're doing process work. So, listening, being present with, that's really a lot of times more than we understand. It's a bigger gift than we know. And it might not be the gift they were hoping for, expecting, but it's a pretty big gift to listen and be present with them in that thing. And it's like spotters, we're spotting them while they're on the trapeze bar or whatever. Good question. So in the group context, a major expression of boundaries are the group guidelines, right? So the group guidelines say, this is what we do in group, this is what we don't do. It sets up boundaries. So we don't fix each other. So we don't tell each other what you ought to do this, you should do that, you've got to do this. But we share our own experiences. Here's a thing I went through. Here's a lesson I learned. Maybe that'll be useful to you. So we say, we don't do these. That's outside the boundary. But here's everything that's inside the boundary. And that's easier for people to manage, to say, all right, well, I sure want to make their life better by telling them the right answer, but I guess I'll just share my own experiences and hope that the Holy Spirit will help them with that. And that's kind of good learning anyhow. And I think when you're doing the guidelines, some people are skeptical because it feels like controlling to some folks. It's limiting. Especially if they've had a negative experience in a truly controlling environment, this can look pretty similar. Oh, so you're telling me what I can and can't do? And so it's scary. So one of the things we can do is when we do that, when we say no, here's the things we can say yes to. I think of them as I think I mentioned the guardrails. And as long as you drive between the guardrails, you're not going to run in a ditch or off a cliff. So these are the guardrails. But anywhere between the guardrails, you can drive, you can go, you can work and operate. So when I say no, here's what I say yes. And the other is just explain what the guideline does. What's the benefit to us as individuals and to our group? If you're going to have a guideline, there should be a good reason for it. If you don't have a good reason, don't have it in the guidelines. And if there is a good reason, explain it to people. If, especially support recovery group, where it's going to be a set number of weeks, 8, 10, 12 weeks, I might, in the first couple of weeks, take a little more time to unpack the guidelines and explain, and this is how this works, and this is how we might accidentally trip across it, and this is, when I bring us back, it just means this, I'm keeping us here so we'll be safe, and we'll be productive. And when people hear the explanation, they go, oh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I don't want anyone trying to fix me, so I guess I'm going to have to not fix other people. And adults, they can understand stuff. They like to understand. Kids, you can't always explain every boundary you give a child. But you probably can to most adults. So go ahead. Just treat them like adults and give the explanation. Then in later weeks, I spend less time, just remind them of the guideline. And they go, yeah, I get that. So that sort of helps for those folks who say, so you're not trying to control me. You really are trying to create a space that's safe. And I want other people to abide by those guidelines when they're interacting with me. Absolutely, I do. So I get it. That's why we in our group have these guidelines. I think a lot of us have like an internal compass about boundaries and like a general sense. we go, I think the right answer is no. Now, we might be nervous about it because we're people pleasers. We don't want to make people mad. But a lot of us, we have kind of like a gyroscope inside of us. And so Jennifer's going to help me. We're going to do a little game here called Speed Boundaries. And so we're going to do this interaction. And just as you hear me speak, see what your instincts throw up in your mind as a boundary or not, and see if it matches with what Jennifer says. All right? So you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Oh, so hey, Jennifer. Hey, I know this is my first night in your group, but can I borrow your car?
No.
Can I lead group next week?
No.
No. Will you marry me?
No.
Do you have 3 hours that I could talk to you about something?
No.
Do you have 15 minutes that I could talk to you about something?
Yes, I do.
Can I talk to you about something I heard about Joyce?
No.
No. Okay. Can I talk to you about this growth I have on my back?
No.
Can I talk to you about this hard decision that I have to make?
Yes.
Would you make that decision for me?
No.
Call my mom on Mother's Day?
No.
Tell my boss I need a sabbatical?
No.
Come on, at least tell him I need a raise.
No.
Fine.
Said
Did you
yes
have
to
an
two.
instinct for him? You go, that's wrong. Someone's like, oh, that is wrong in so many ways. And you go, oh, I should probably come up with 15 minutes for something like that. But to say, yeah, I don't have 3 hours. And then there's some people, that's why you do text and you don't answer the phone, because you go, oh, if I talk to that person, it's going to be 3 hours. And so being able to have boundaries to say, hey, yeah, I got 20 minutes I can talk to you. What do I want to talk about? And be able to set those boundaries out and know that you're not being a bad guy, a bad person in any way. Now, if this boundary thing, I don't think any of us are born, a few of us are born with naturally good boundaries. And so if you've not had a chance to learn them, you think, oh, I always struggle with those boundaries. The book, Boundaries, by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, is a great book, and I highly recommend that. It kind of takes you through the myths around it and the ways you practice and set and reinforce boundaries. So boundaries are important in small group leading, small group facilitating. With boundaries, you'll increase your joy in doing group leading, and you'll increase your longevity in ministry. You won't burn yourself out. So very important that we all get some mastery of boundaries.
That's good. So boundaries help the group, and they help the group leader.
Yes.
Boundaries or guidelines are generally set by whom? In a small group environment, who sets those guidelines?
Well, it's normally the group leader is going to be the one to share them, but some guidelines are set by the church. They say, with the vineyard, these are things we do, and we never do this other thing. Some, it could be set by the ministry director, the pastor. So like there could be some things that Jennifer would say, we can do that in our groups. But I would say, in our life reset groups, we can't do that. There's a greater vulnerability, there's a greater risk. So the pastor may have a few guidelines. And then as a group leader, you can have your weigh in on guidelines. And I've even had groups. I had a group come to me that we had a history of people coming in like 30 minutes late, and they were new people and we didn't know who they were. And the group said, can we have the guideline that we don't come in late? Because we don't know these people. We don't know if they're trustworthy. They didn't go through the guidelines. We don't know if when we share vulnerably, if they'll treat us with respect. I said, fair enough. That's a fair guideline. So we added it to our guidelines. Please come on time. If you can't come on time, we'll invite you to come back next week. And so all those people can contribute, but they all have to be in alignment. So as a pastor, I don't have the luxury of having a guideline that's contrary to what the vineyard leadership says. And as a group leader, you don't have the luxury to come up with a guideline that's different than your pastor says. They're all in alignment, but each one contributes. And it really is protection of the group members, protection of you, and protection of the church and the ministry that we're doing.
That's good.
Make sense?
Any questions for Mark on this topic of boundaries and how they play out in small groups?
I had one. I love what you were saying about the difference between being responsible for and being responsible to.
Yeah.
And I just had this thought brewing, being a part of small groups now for a long time, growing up and having lots of different small group leaders, and knowing there'll probably be some existing small group leaders who watch this training later on.
Right.
It feels like what I've seen is a lot of times familiarity can breed apathy in small group leading, to where it should become such a part of like your DNA and your routine that the intentionality and the boundary setting like really falls away, and it's easy to just walk in and be like, oh, what are we talking about today? You know, there's no prep, no structure, intentionality. And I'm totally guilty of it too, like leading in high school ministry for a while. But like, what would you speak to with that, with on the topic of longevity as well as a small group leader and boundaries, like to, I don't know, addressing that maybe with your leader or working through that yourself, you know, to try to grow in that way?
You're absolutely right, Caleb. Familiarity brings presumptuousness in that case, right? Oh, they'll be fine if we just wing it, and or they won't care if I tell them what they ought to do. Or so, yeah, over time, for any of these skills, it's possible for us to get a little rusty, to get a little lazy. It's always convicting for me if I am taking an apprentice through our groups, because then I got to take them through that checklist. And I'll look at the checklist and go, you know what, I haven't been doing that in my last couple of groups. I got to get back with the programmer because I'm supposed to model for them. And so it's easy for any of us to kind of, we forget, we drift away. So I think, one, have grace for yourself, have grace for each other, because none of us are doing this perfectly. But maybe every now and again, help with the training. If your ministry is doing a training, say, I'll help do breakout sessions or whatever, just as a way to remember, I'll take an apprentice. And the act of guiding them through a skills checklist, oh, I got to brush up my skills on that one. So just be mindful of it. And again, no Lone Rangers. If I'm co-leading with someone, we say, let's help each other not get lazy here on this. Okay, yeah, we'll help each other. And so you're not trying to pick on one another, just saying we both want to do high level care, but human nature is we might forget. So having a team to say, oh, let's ramp this up again. We got a little soft on this. No harm, no foul. It's just what happens. And so we just, as soon as we figure it out, get back on the horse, back in the saddle, back with the program, and get back to doing your skills as you've been trained to do them. That's as good as I can figure out for anyone, including me.
That's a great question. Anybody else on the topic of boundaries?
I was just curious, when you guys did that exercise and you said, do you have 15 minutes? And she said yes. And you said, do you have 3 hours? And she said no. I was wondering, as a leader, if you see somebody who you know really needs your support, they need prayer, you recognize that maybe they do need a little more time. Do you as a leader try to free yourself up by getting them connected to someone else because you know that you've got a lot of people in your charge, or is it okay to take them on kind of and nurture them yourself? Like, how do you negotiate all that?
Yes, good question, brilliant question. So referral is a great tool to have in your repertoire as well. Like, you don't have to be everything to them. And being a leader, you know about other ministries, the Healing Center and Monday Night Life Reset and things, the prayer ministry opportunities. So it's absolutely worthwhile to say, you know what you're asking of me, I don't think I'm the best person to do that for you, and I want you to get the very best care. I know these folks at our church, they do it way better than me. Would you like to get the best care? Who's going to turn that down? So, oh yeah, if you're not good at it, tell me who's good. I'm going to go get that from them. And so it's not putting them off to refer them to a place that is going to do a thing better than you could do. So a referral is a great tool. It's good to know your limits, what you can't do. And if you have a weak spot, to know who in our greater area, and it might be places in the city. Like, we don't do professional counseling at the Vineyard,
Right.
but I got a list of professional Christian counselors. So we'll help people figure out a place. Now, should you make space? You figured out the flaw in my teaching here. This is like the super advanced stuff, and I didn't want to overwhelm you, but you asked for it, so here we go. Strap yourself in. I was doing a book study with folks. Most of them were counselors. Oh, what a nightmare that was. You couldn't say good evening without being psychoanalyzed 6 ways to Sunday. But we were doing a book study, I think, Hiding from Love. It was Cloud or Townsend or both of them. And my buddy came one night and he said, I was sort of convicted about this thing about loving, that Jesus, by strict boundaries, rules should not have paid for our sins. Strict rule of boundaries would say, well, it's your sin, it's your problem to solve, I'll support you. But that's not what he did. He said, I'm going to solve that one for you, because you can't solve that. And Scripture says that we love one another, and we would love one another like him sacrificially sometimes. But there's also that Scripture says that if we don't have enough love in our heart, certain things happen. And I don't think it's a condemnation. I think it's just an acknowledgement that sometimes I don't have enough love in my heart to be betrayed over and over and over and over again and still be okay. I don't have enough love in my heart to have my time taken over and over and over and over again. So where I once thought of boundaries, strong boundaries was the quintessential measure of emotional, psychological health. What I've come to understand is boundaries are a concession God makes to me in those instances when I don't have enough love. Now, if there's an instance where someone's asking a great deal, asking something sacrificial of you, and you have love sufficient to do that, you may in fact do that. The difference between acts of sacrificial love and acts of codependency are all in here, where no one else can see or know. It's like, am I doing this because God loved me and I'm grateful, and I'm aware it'll be a sacrifice and I'm prepared to make it? Or am I doing it out of some misguided guilt, obligation, performance-driven thing, fear of what people will think, fear of what they'll think, I don't want to say no and they'll be mad at me, think I'm a bad group leader? Only you will know which group of motivations you're acting out of. So it's a possibility, and it's something that you and the Holy Spirit want to weigh carefully. Maybe your family, if it also is a sacrifice on their part, you're going to spend 3 hours, and that's 3 hours you normally would spend with your kids or your spouse or whatever. Work that out with them. But they may be in agreement, say, no, this person really, they just need help right now. And it's not for the rest of their life. And that's what I'll look at too. Are they going to take the help I give and do something with it? But if I see they don't really take any ownership for their life, that giving them 3 hours is a black hole of time that I'll never get back and nothing good will come from it. But this is someone who's trying and they're making progress, and 3 hours could really keep them from stopping and keep them going. I may choose to do a sacrificial thing. I kind of know what the boundaries are. I think boundaries are like a budget for like my emotional energy. And there's times in my financial budget I might spend a little extra on a gift. But I know I spent extra, so it's going to have to come from somewhere. And I know I can't do that long term. I got to stay with my budget. So after I do that extra giving, I come back to my budget. Same with my emotional energy. So I'm going to spend a little extra of my emotional energy doing this, but I know I'm going to have to take it from somewhere else, and I can't do it forever. I have to get back to my budget of. In my early ministry time, I thought, well, I'm representing God, and God never says no, so I can never say no. Well, the problem is God is infinite and limitless. I am not.
Right.
I have limits, very finite limits, and I have to pay attention to those and live within those. So I may say no. God is saying yes to you, but it's not through me. Let's help you find out who the person God is going to say yes to you through. And it might be the Healing Center prayer teams, where they're going to take an hour plus to just pray with you. Weekend prayer teams are not going to pray with you for an hour. The healing room prayer people will pray with you for an hour. So it's a valid need, a valid request being asked in an invalid place. Let me help you get connected to the right place, because you deserve to have your need met. I'm not the person who's going to meet it for you. Does that help figure out how to navigate? It really is, it gets tricky figuring those things out. Sacrificial love, our King does it for us, and he may call us to do it sometimes. But knowing what are healthy boundaries. The other thing I think about is if I remove the help I'm giving, will this person fall flat on their face? If I remove the help I'm giving, it will be an inconvenience to them, but they'll keep going. If the help I'm giving, they're actually dependent on, I probably have overstepped.
That's good clarification. Great question.
As you kind of mentioned that, I'm connecting dots to what we've gone through so far, and I think the emotional wholeness, right? One of the requirements or criteria is so important, because you know what your budget is, if you know where you are and how far you've come.
That's right.
It's good.
That's a very good point.
You have to have self-awareness to know what your budget is so you live within it.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
One final question on boundaries.
How do you respond to someone who's antagonistic to your boundaries?
That's a great question.
That's a good one. Again, the active listening is my go-to skill. It's my first used skill. It's my most often used skill. We're going to talk about that very soon. And it paves the way. So you're really angry that I've said, no, I'm not going to do that for you. Wow, I hear that. So at least just acknowledge, don't ignore that.
Right.
Say, well, boy, it's not my intention to make you angry. My intention would be to help you grow in a way that I'm able to do, and that's just, I'm not able to do that. I'm sorry that's upsetting to you, but I can't do that. I'm glad to help you find a place that could, but I just can't. And you just have to, it's a lot about your self-talk, what we tell ourselves. I'm not in this to be popular. I'm not in this to make people like me. If I have that need, I need to go to my counselor and work that out. I'm here to serve them and to help them grow. I mean, God's job is not to make me happy. Does he make you happy all the time? Not me. His job is to help me become whole in all I'm meant to be, and to be mature, and to be in close relationship with him. And honestly, some of those things grow only in very difficult times. So people come and want us to rescue them from very difficult times, and we're not always able to do that. So our boundary is, no, I can't help you solve that, but you and God will solve it, and maybe I and some other people can give you some resources that will help.
That's good. That's good. Okay, great questions, great discussion on boundaries in small groups. So thank you so much.